I'm Sylvia, 56 years old, and my younger sister Nancy was getting married to a wealthy businessman named Richard. Despite our complicated relationship, I was genuinely happy for her. Everything at the wedding seemed picture perfect until my husband Derek leaned over and whispered, "We have to leave. Now." When I asked why, he simply said, "I'll explain in the car." Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more shocking family revelations that changed my life forever. Nancy and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's 8 years younger than me, and I practically raised her after our parents divorced when I was 18 and she was just 10. Our mother remarried quickly, and between her new marriage and working long hours, she had little time for Nancy. I became a second mother to my sister, making sure she had everything she needed. I sacrificed my own college education to work and help support our family. My job at the local accounting firm wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough for me to help with Nancy's school supplies, clothes, and eventually her college application fees. I wanted her to have the opportunities I never got. As Nancy grew older, she developed a habit of taking my kindness for granted. When she needed money for her first car, I dipped into my savings. When she needed a place to stay during college breaks, my modest 2-bedroom apartment was always available. But there was never much gratitude. Nancy seemed to believe these sacrifices were simply what older sisters were supposed to do. "You know, Sylvia, you really should take some night classes or something," Nancy would say during her college years, examining my apartment with barely concealed disdain. "You could be doing so much more than just processing payroll all day." Those comments stung, but I brushed them aside. I was proud of the responsible, capable woman my sister was becoming, even if she couldn't see how much I'd given up for her. I told myself that one day she would understand. When Nancy graduated with honors and landed a prestigious marketing job in the city, I attended her graduation alone. Our mother was on a cruise with her husband, but she sent an expensive gift. I saved for months to buy Nancy a professional wardrobe for her new career. She thanked me quickly before turning to show her friends the designer watch our mother had sent. "This is perfect for meeting clients," she gushed, while my gift bag sat unopened on her dorm room floor. As the years passed, Nancy climbed the corporate ladder rapidly. Her salary soon dwarfed mine, and she never missed an opportunity to point out the differences in our lives. She bought a downtown condo while I still lived in my small suburban apartment. She drove a luxury car while I kept my reliable Honda running year after year. She vacationed in Europe while Derek and I saved for weekend getaways to the beach. Derek came into my life when I was 38. He was a structural engineer with a practical mind and a kind heart. He saw my worth immediately in ways Nancy never had. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family at the local community center. Nancy brought an expensive gift, but commented throughout the reception about how quaint everything was and how she would want something much more elegant for her own wedding. "You know," she told me during our mother-daughter dance, since our father wasn't in the picture anymore, "you could have had something much nicer if you just asked me to chip in. This is all so simple." I smiled and thanked her for the offer, but Derek later found me crying in the bathroom. He held me close and whispered, "Your sister has everything but appreciation for the one person who made it all possible." Over the years, Derek became increasingly protective of me when it came to Nancy. He saw how her casual comments about our little house or my modest career affected me even when I tried to hide it. He urged me more than once to stand up to her, but I always made excuses. "She doesn't mean anything by it," I would say. "That's just Nancy's way." But Derek would shake his head. "No, Sylvia, that's not just her way. That's her showing you exactly who she is, and you're refusing to see it." Deep down, I knew he was right, but Nancy was my sister. The little girl I had helped raise, the child I had sacrificed so much for. How could I turn my back on that bond, no matter how one-sided it had become? Besides, I was genuinely happy for her success. I wanted her to have everything I couldn't. Every time she bought something new or received a promotion, I celebrated with her sincerely. When she called to complain about problems with colleagues or issues with her luxury condo association, I listened patiently, offering advice when asked. I was still taking care of her, even though she was now a successful adult. "You know what your problem is, Sylvia?" Derek said to me one night after I'd spent an hour on the phone talking Nancy through a work crisis. "You think that if you just love her enough, she'll eventually learn to appreciate you. But some people just take and take without ever looking back to see what it costs the giver." I dismissed his concerns, but his words lingered in my mind. Still, Nancy was my only sister, and despite everything, I loved her. I wanted to believe that underneath her self-centered behavior was the sweet little girl who once looked up to me with adoring eyes. The girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and hold my hand so tight I lost circulation. That's what family's about, isn't it? Loving someone despite their flaws. Standing by them even when it's difficult. I had already lost so much of my family. I couldn't bear to lose Nancy too, no matter how much her behavior hurt me. Little did I know that my refusal to see Nancy clearly was about to come crashing down around me in the most public and painful way possible. When Nancy called to announce her engagement to Richard, I was genuinely happy for her. Richard was a successful businessman who owned several commercial properties across the state. He was handsome, charming, and seemed to adore Nancy. At least that's what I thought at the time. "Oh my God, Sylvia, you should see the ring," Nancy squealed over the phone. "It's 5 carats. 5. Josephine at work nearly fainted when she saw it. Her husband only got her 3 carats, and they're way richer than we are." I congratulated her, sincerely listening, as she described Richard's elaborate proposal at a 5-star restaurant complete with a violinist and champagne. "We're thinking about a June wedding," she continued without taking a breath. "Probably at the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown. Their ballroom can hold 300 people, which is perfect because Richard has so many business associates to invite." The wedding planning quickly took over Nancy's life, and by extension mine. Despite having a professional wedding planner on retainer, Nancy constantly called me for advice, assistance, and occasionally to vent about how stressful everything was. "Can you believe they want $5,000 just for the flowers? It's highway robbery, Sylvia, but Richard says we can't cheap out on something so visible." I spent countless weekends driving to the city to help Nancy with various wedding tasks. I researched vendors, created spreadsheets comparing prices, and even hand-wrote 200 save-the-date cards because Nancy decided at the last minute that the printed ones didn't have the right feel. Derek watched all this with growing concern. "She has a professional planner and an unlimited budget, yet somehow you're doing all the work," he observed one Sunday night as I soaked my aching feet after a day spent running around with Nancy. "She's just nervous." I defended her. "It's a big day." Derek just shook his head. "And what about your big day all those years ago? Did she help you address a single invitation?" I changed the subject. I didn't want to admit that Nancy had shown up to my wedding an hour late, claiming she'd had an important work meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. As the wedding approached, I assumed Nancy would ask me to be her maid of honor. I was her only sister after all. But when she called to discuss the bridal party, she had other plans. "So I've asked Madison to be my maid of honor," she said casually. Madison was a co-worker who came from a wealthy family and frequently appeared in Nancy's social media posts. "But of course I want you to be a bridesmaid. The dresses are blush pink. I hope that color works for you. I know you usually wear darker colors to hide your, well, you know." I swallowed my disappointment and assured her that blush pink would be fine. When I told Derek later, he was furious on my behalf. "After everything you've done for her, she picked some random coworker over her own sister, the sister who practically raised her." "Madison is her best friend," I said weakly. "And they work together. It makes sense." "No, it doesn't, and you know it," Derek insisted. "When are you going to stop making excuses for her behavior, Sylvia? When are you going to admit that she treats you like this because you allow it?" I changed the subject again. It was easier than facing the truth. The following weekend, Nancy invited all her bridesmaids for a dress fitting. All except me. I found out about it when she posted photos on social media, the 6 other women all smiling in a high-end bridal boutique champagne glasses in hand. When I called to ask about it, Nancy sounded distracted. Oh, sorry about that. I figured since you live so far away, it would be inconvenient for you to drive in just for a fitting. Don't worry. I ordered your dress in the size I think will work. You might need to have it taken in a bit at the waist, though. I guessed a little large to be safe. I lived less than an hour away, and I had been driving to the city almost every weekend to help with wedding preparations. But I said nothing. 2 weeks before the wedding, I still hadn't seen my dress. When I mentioned this to Nancy, she had it delivered to my house with a terse note, "Try it on ASAP, and let me know if alterations are needed. No time to waste." The dress was beautiful, but clearly designed for someone with a different body type than mine. The neckline was too low, the waist too high, and it clung in all the wrong places. When I sent Nancy a photo and asked if I could get it altered to be more flattering, she responded immediately. "Please don't change anything. The dresses need to be uniform. Just wear shapewear underneath. Lots of it." The day before the wedding, I attended the rehearsal dinner at an exclusive restaurant. Nancy had seated me and Derek at a table far from the main wedding party with distant relatives of Richard whom I'd never met. When I asked if there had been a mistake, Nancy just squeezed my arm a little too tightly. "The seating is very strategic, Sylvia. Richard's business partners need to be up front. You understand, right? It's not personal. It's just business." Derek was unusually quiet that evening, observing everything with a furrowed brow. On the drive back to our hotel, he finally spoke. "Something doesn't feel right about this whole situation, Sylvia. The way Nancy's friends look at you, the way Richard barely acknowledges you. I can't put my finger on it, but something's off." "It's just wedding stress," I assured him, though I had noticed some odd interactions too. A few of Nancy's bridesmaids had given me pitying looks, and Richard had indeed avoided speaking to me directly all evening. "Maybe," Derek conceded, but he didn't sound convinced. "Just keep your eyes open tomorrow, okay?" I nodded, pushing down a growing sense of unease. Tomorrow was Nancy's big day, and nothing was going to spoil it. Not even the nagging feeling that something was very wrong. The morning of Nancy's wedding dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the Grand Plaza Hotel early to help her get ready, carrying a special gift I'd saved for months to buy. It was a sapphire bracelet not as expensive as the jewelry she usually wore, but it matched her eyes perfectly. It would be her something blue. When I entered the bridal suite, chaos reigned. Bridesmaids were rushing around in various states of undressed makeup artists, and hairstylists were setting up their stations, and Nancy was on the phone gesturing wildly. "No, I said cascading orchids, not rounded bouquets. Fix it or I'm not paying." She hung up and turned to see me. "Oh, Sylvia, good. You can help Madison with the welcome bags. They're in the corner." "No, hello, no thank you for coming." I set my gift aside and went to help Madison, who barely acknowledged me as she directed me to stuff expensive miniature champagne bottles and gourmet chocolates into monogram bags. For the next 2 hours, I was assigned menial tasks while the other bridesmaids got their hair and makeup done, took selfies, and sipped champagne. When it was finally my turn for hair and makeup, the stylist looked at his watch. "We're running behind. I'll have to do a simplified version for you." Nancy, already stunning in her designer gown, didn't even look up from her phone. "That's fine. Just make sure she looks presentable." I bit my tongue and sat in the chair watching in the mirror as the stylist spent 20 minutes on me, compared to the hour he'd spent on each of the other bridesmaids. The result was fine. Not special, not terrible. Just fine. As I changed into my ill-fitting bridesmaid dress, I presented Nancy with the bracelet. She opened the box and gave a tight smile. "Oh, that's sweet, Sylvia, but I'm actually already wearing my jewelry." She gestured to her wrist adorned with diamond bracelets that probably cost more than my car. "Maybe I'll wear it another time." She set the box aside without another word, and I felt my heart sink. But I pushed the feeling away. This was her day, not mine. My feelings didn't matter. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The cathedral was decorated with thousands of white orchids and roses. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in specially, and a string quartet played as we processed down the aisle. I walked alone, feeling self-conscious in my too-tight dress and minimal makeup, but I kept a smile fixed on my face. Nancy was radiant as she walked down the aisle. Richard beamed at her, and for a moment I felt pure joy for my sister. This was what she had always wanted, to be the center of attention, admired and envied by all. In that moment, I could almost forget the slights and dismissals of the past months. My little sister was getting married, and I was genuinely happy for her. After the ceremony, guests moved to the hotel ballroom for the reception. Derek met me there, handsome in his dark suit, and immediately pulled me into a tight hug. "You look beautiful," he whispered, though we both knew my appearance paled in comparison to the other bridal party members. That was Derek always seeing the best in me. The reception was as lavish as the ceremony. Ice sculptures adorned the buffet tables, a 12-piece band played on a raised platform, and waiters circulated with endless trays of champagne and gourmet appetizers. Nancy and Richard made their entrance to thunderous applause, and the celebration began. As the evening progressed, I began to notice strange interactions. A woman I didn't know approached me at the bar, looked me up and down, and said, "So you're the sister, before walking away. A group of Richard's friends fell silent as I passed their table, then burst into laughter once I was a few steps away. At our assigned table, far from the wedding party, Derek and I sat with elderly relatives and a few corporate acquaintances who seemed confused about who we were. One older gentleman leaned over to me during dinner. "Are you the bride's cousin? I thought her only sister lived abroad." "No, I'm her sister Sylvia," I explained, puzzled. "Oh," he looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Richard mentioned a sister in Europe. My mistake." I frowned, wondering why Richard would tell people I lived in Europe. As I looked around the room, I noticed more and more people glancing my way, then quickly averting their eyes when I caught them looking. It was as if I was the subject of some joke I wasn't privy to. Derek noticed too. He was increasingly tense beside me, his jaw set in a hard line as he observed the room. When I asked what was wrong, he just shook his head. "I'm not sure yet, but something's not right." Then came the speeches. The best man went first, telling appropriate but funny stories about Richard. The maid of honor, Madison, followed with a speech that praised Nancy's work ethic and fashion sense, but oddly made no mention of her character or their friendship. When Nancy took the microphone for her own speech, I sat up straighter, expecting at least a brief acknowledgement of our relationship. But as she thanked her friends, colleagues, and even her stepfather profusely, my name never came up. Not once. She spoke about how her mother had been her role model, how her stepfather had supported her career ambitions, how her friends had been her rocks through difficult times. But there was no mention of the sister who had helped raise her, who had sacrificed her own education to ensure Nancy could have hers, who had been her constant support for decades. It was as if I didn't exist. Derek reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it tightly. I fought back tears, determined not to cause a scene. This was Nancy's day. It didn't matter if she hadn't acknowledged me. It didn't matter. But it did matter. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. After the speeches, the dancing began. Derek led me to the dance floor, holding me close as if trying to shield me from the curious and sometimes pitying glances of the other guests. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm fine," I lied. "It's not important. She was probably just nervous and forgot to mention me." Derek didn't argue, but the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe that for a second. As we swayed to the music, I tried to focus on the positive. Nancy was happy. She had married a man she loved. That should be enough for me. But as the evening continued, the strange behavior of the other guests became impossible to ignore. People I'd never met were giving me sympathetic looks. Richard's mother patted my arm as she passed me and murmured, "Just dreadful what they're planning. Simply dreadful." Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. Derek was becoming increasingly agitated. He kept checking his watch and scanning the room as if waiting for something to happen. When I asked what was bothering him, he just shook his head again. Not here. I'll tell you later. As the night wore on, I began to feel like an intruder at the wedding rather than a member of the family. Nancy hadn't spoken to me since before the ceremony, and Richard seemed to be actively avoiding me. Even the waitstaff seemed to know something I didn't. One waiter looking at me with such pity as he refilled my water glass that I nearly asked him what was going on. It was around 9:30 as the cake was being served that I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. I had stepped away to the ladies' room and was returning when I passed a group of Nancy's friends huddled near the hallway entrance. "It's happening after the cake," one woman was saying excitedly. "Richard's speech is going to be epic. Nancy's been planning this for months." "I can't believe they're actually going to do it," another replied. "It's so mean, but God, it's going to be hilarious." "Does the sister know what's her name? Sylvia? Does she have any idea?" "No way. Nancy made sure she's completely clueless. That's what makes it so perfect." My heart was pounding as I hurried back to our table. What were they talking about? What had Nancy been planning for months that involved me? Before I could reach Derek, he appeared suddenly at my side, his face grim. He gripped my elbow firmly and leaned down to whisper in my ear, "We have to leave. Now." "What? Why?" I asked, confused and alarmed by his urgency. "I'll explain in the car," he said, already guiding me toward the exit. "But we need to go right now before Richard makes his speech." "Derek, I can't just leave my sister's wedding. What's going on?" His eyes were pained as he looked at me. "Trust me, Sylvia. Please. You don't want to be here for what's coming next." Something in his expression made me listen. Without even saying goodbye to anyone, we slipped out of the ballroom and hurried through the hotel lobby. As we reached our car in the parking garage, I finally pulled away from Derek's grip. "You need to tell me what's happening right now," I demanded. Derek unlocked the car. "Get in. I'll explain everything on the way home." The car ride home was tense with an oppressive silence that seemed to fill every inch of space between us. Derek gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles were white, and I sat rigid in the passenger seat, a storm of confusion and hurt swirling inside me. We were 10 minutes into the drive when I couldn't take it anymore. "Derek, please. Tell me what's going on. Why did we leave like that?" Derek glanced at me, then back at the road. His face was grim in the dim light from the dashboard. "A few days ago, I helped Nancy with her phone. Remember, she was having trouble with some wedding planning app and asked me to look at it since I'm good with technology." I nodded. Nancy had always dismissed Derek as just an engineer, but wasn't above asking for his help when needed. While I was fixing the app, a document notification popped up. Something shared between her and Richard. I didn't mean to see it, but the preview showed my name and yours. I got curious. He paused, taking a deep breath. I opened it, Sylvia, and what I saw, I couldn't believe it. I still can't. "What was it?" I asked, my throat tight with apprehension. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then, without taking his eyes off the road, he asked softly, "You really didn't notice anything strange tonight? The way people were looking at you? The whispers, Richard avoiding you completely?" "I noticed something was off," I admitted, "but I thought maybe it was just wedding stress or, I don't know." "What did you find, Derek?" He didn't answer immediately. We drove in silence for another few minutes before he spoke again. "They were planning to humiliate you, publicly, tonight." My heart seemed to stop. "What?" "Richard's speech after the cake cutting. It wasn't going to be a typical groom's speech. It was designed to mock you, in front of everyone." I felt sick. That can't be right. Nancy wouldn't do that to me. Derek's laugh was bitter. The document I saw was titled Sylvia Roast. It had lines for Richard to say jokes about you, stories Nancy had shared to make you look bad. They even had a slideshow prepared with unflattering photos of you, some of them doctored to look worse. I couldn't process what he was saying. My sister planning to publicly humiliate me at her own wedding? It was unthinkable. "You're mistaken," I said weakly. "It must have been some kind of joke, or maybe it was about someone else." Derek shook his head. "It specifically mentioned you by name, Sylvia. It talked about how you weren't smart enough for college and had to work as a lowly bookkeeper while Nancy became successful. It mocked our wedding, our house, even the gift you brought tonight. Nancy had written notes about how you would react, how funny it would be to see your face when you realized the whole wedding party was in on the joke." Tears filled my eyes as the truth began to sink in. All those strange looks, the whispers, Richard's mother's cryptic comment. It all made terrible sense now. "Why," I whispered, "why would she do this to me?" Derek reached over to take my hand. "I don't know, Sylvia. I've never understood why Nancy treats you the way she does, but I couldn't let you sit there and be humiliated. I just couldn't." We drove in silence for a while, my mind reeling with the revelation. Then a terrible thought struck me. "Derek, did you say anything to Nancy? Does she know that you know?" "No," he assured me. I put her phone back and pretended I'd never seen it. "But this morning I called your mother." "You what?" I gasped. "I called her and told her what I'd found. I didn't want to, but I figured someone needed to be there who was on your side in case we couldn't leave in time." She didn't believe me at first, but I could tell she was going to pay close attention. I slumped in my seat, overwhelmed. My own sister had planned to mock and humiliate me on what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. The thought was almost too painful to bear. By the time we reached our house, I was emotionally exhausted. Derek helped me inside and sat me on the couch. Without a word, he went to get his iPad and brought it back to me. "The wedding had a live stream for guests who couldn't attend. It's still going," he explained gently. "You don't have to watch, but if you want to see what happened after we left." I stared at the screen, torn between needing to know and fearing what I might see. Finally, I nodded, and Derek pressed play. On the screen, the reception was in full swing. The camera was positioned to show the head table and dance floor. I could see Nancy looking around the room, her expression growing increasingly annoyed. She leaned over to whisper something to Richard, who scanned the crowd and shrugged. Then it was time for the cake cutting, followed by Richard taking the microphone for his speech. Nancy was beaming beside him, an anticipatory gleam in her eyes that made my stomach turn. "Good evening, everyone," Richard began smoothly. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us tonight. Before we continue the dancing, I'd like to take a moment to talk about family." Nancy's smile widened, and she nudged him encouragingly. "Family is interesting, isn't it? The people we're supposed to love unconditionally, no matter what. Nancy has told me so many stories about growing up with her sister Sylvia. My heart pounded as I watched. This was it, the beginning of my public humiliation. But then something unexpected happened. My mother stood up from her table, champagne glass in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," she called out, her voice carrying clearly over the microphone. Richard looked annoyed at the interruption. "Perhaps after my speech, Mrs. Wilson." "No, I think now is perfect," my mother insisted, moving toward the head table. The camera followed her as she approached, her expression pleasant but determined. "I want to toast to my daughters, both of them." Nancy's smile faltered slightly. Richard looked at her with confusion. "To Nancy, congratulations on your wedding day," my mother continued. "And to Sylvia, who couldn't be here right now but who deserves recognition for the incredible sister she has always been." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nancy's face darkened as she realized something was wrong. "Many of you may not know this," my mother went on, her voice stronger now, "but when our family went through difficult times, it was Sylvia who stepped up. At just 18, she put her own dreams aside to help raise Nancy. She worked full-time to help support us when I couldn't do it alone." Nancy was frantically whispering to Richard now, who was trying to reclaim control of the situation. If we could just continue with the planned speeches. He tried, but my mother wasn't finished. Sylvia sacrificed her college education so Nancy could have hers. She has been nothing but supportive, loving, and generous to her sister for her entire life. So I find it absolutely appalling that tonight of all nights, there were plans to mock and belittle her. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Nancy's face had gone white. "Mom," she hissed, "what are you talking about? Sit down." My mother turned to face the guests. "I've been made aware that the next speech was designed to humiliate my daughter Sylvia. I want everyone here to know that I will not stand for it, and neither should you. If you were aware of this plan and thought it was amusing, you should be ashamed." The room had gone deadly silent. Richard was trying to take the microphone from my mother, but she held firm. "Nancy, I love you, but I am deeply disappointed in you right now. Sylvia deserves better than this. Much better." With that, she handed the microphone back to a stunned Richard and walked out of the ballroom, head held high. The camera captured the chaos that followed. Guests began whispering to each other, some looking shocked, others embarrassed. A few people stood up and began collecting their things to leave. Nancy was visibly fuming, her perfect wedding moment shattered. She grabbed the microphone from Richard. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "My sister has always been jealous of me. Always. She couldn't even stay for my whole wedding because she can't stand to see me happy, and now she's turned my own mother against me." Some of the guests looked uncomfortable at this outburst. Others began to leave more quickly. Richard tried to salvage the situation, taking the microphone back. "Let's all just enjoy the rest of the evening. The band will play and we'll continue celebrating." But the damage was done. The camera showed groups of guests making their exits, the dance floor emptying, the perfect wedding reception falling apart. Derek stopped the video, looking at me with concern. "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was shattered, but also strangely relieved. For years, I had made excuses for Nancy's behavior, convinced myself that deep down she loved me as much as I loved her. Now I knew the truth, as painful as it was. My sister didn't just take me for granted. She actively resented me enough to plan my public humiliation on her wedding day. "I need some time," I whispered, standing up on shaky legs. Derek nodded understanding and let me retreat to our bedroom alone. As I sat in the dark, my phone began to buzz with notifications. Text messages from relatives who had been at the wedding, voicemails from friends, and finally a call from my mother. I answered, my voice small. "Mom?" "Oh, Sylvia," she sighed. "Are you all right, sweetheart? Derek told you?" "Yes," and I didn't want to believe it. But when I got to the wedding and saw how they seated you, how people were looking at you, I started paying attention. Then I overheard some of Nancy's friends talking about the speech Richard was going to give. "Thank you," I said, tears flowing freely now, "for standing up for me." There was a pause before my mother spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have stood up for you long before tonight, Sylvia. I let you take on too much when you were just a girl yourself. I saw how Nancy treated you over the years, and I never said anything. I'm so sorry for that." It was the first time my mother had ever acknowledged the imbalance in how she treated her daughters, the first time she'd recognized my sacrifices. "Nancy is furious," she continued. "She and Richard left their own reception early. Most of the guests had already gone anyway. It was uncomfortable after my little speech." "I can imagine," I said, trying to process everything. "Sylvia, I want you to know something. What you did for our family, for Nancy, it was extraordinary. You were just a child yourself, and you stepped up in ways I never should have allowed. I failed you, and I'm so, so sorry." I couldn't speak through my tears. All these years, I'd wanted someone to see what I'd given up, to acknowledge the sacrifices I'd made. And now, ironically, it had taken Nancy's cruelty to make it happen. "Get some rest," my mother said gently. "We'll talk more tomorrow. And Sylvia, I love you. I'm proud of you. I should have told you that every day." After we hung up, Derek came in and held me as I cried. For the lost years, for the sister I thought I had, for the life I might have had if I hadn't put Nancy's needs before my own for so long. That night was just the beginning of a painful reckoning, but it was also the first step toward freedom I didn't yet know I needed. The days following Nancy's wedding were a blur of phone calls, text messages, and painful revelations. My phone didn't stop ringing as friends and family reached out, many expressing shock and outrage at what Nancy had planned. Some admitted they'd known about the roast, but hadn't realized how hurtful it would be. Others claimed complete ignorance, though their awkward apologies suggested otherwise. Derek was my rock through it all, fielding calls when I couldn't face talking to anyone, bringing me tea when I was too exhausted to move from the couch, holding me through the nights when I woke up crying from dreams where I was standing in front of a laughing crowd in my ill-fitting bridesmaid dress. Nancy and Richard returned early from their honeymoon in the Maldives, cutting the trip short by a week. I only knew this because my mother told me. Nancy hadn't contacted me directly, though she had begun a vicious campaign on social media, posting thinly veiled comments about toxic family members and people who can't let others have their moment. On the third day after the wedding, I received a text from Richard. It was brief and cold. "Your behavior has caused Nancy immense distress. Her perfect day was ruined because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention for once. I suggest you reflect on your jealousy issues." I showed the message to Derek, who nearly threw his phone across the room in anger. Is he serious? Their behavior? They plan to humiliate you in front of 300 people. I felt oddly calm reading the text. It confirmed what I had begun to suspect. This wasn't just Nancy being thoughtless or taking me for granted. This was active malice, and Richard was either completely under her influence or just as cruel as she was. That evening, Nancy finally called. I put the phone on speaker so Derek could hear, wanting a witness to whatever she might say. "Well, I hope you're happy," she began without preamble, her voice dripping with venom. "You've managed to ruin the most important day of my life." I took a deep breath. "I didn't ruin anything, Nancy. I wasn't even there for most of the reception." "Exactly. You left early and sent Mom to do your dirty work. Do you know how many people left after her little speech?" The band was booked until midnight, but the room was half empty by 10:30. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Nancy, you and Richard were planning to publicly humiliate me. Derek saw the document on your phone." There was a pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Oh, that! It was just a joke, Sylvia. God, you've always been so sensitive. It was going to be a funny roast, that's all. Everyone was going to laugh, including you." A joke mocking me for not going to college, when the reason I didn't go was because I was helping to raise you, making fun of my job, my marriage, my appearance. How was any of that funny? See, this is exactly why we needed to lighten things up. You're always playing the martyr, always bringing up ancient history. I sacrificed so much for you, Nancy. I gave up so much for you, Nancy. Do you know how tired I am of hearing that narrative? I felt as if I'd been slapped. I've never said those things to you. You didn't have to. It's in every look you give me, every backhanded compliment about my fancy lifestyle. You resent my success because you've made yourself believe you're responsible for it, and now you expect me to spend my life being grateful to you. Well, I'm done with the guilt trips." Derek was shaking his head in disbelief beside me, but I motioned for him to stay quiet. I needed to hear this, as painful as it was. "Nancy, I have never resented your success. I've always been proud of you. Everything I did was because I love you." "No," Nancy spat. "Everything you did was so you could feel superior. Poor saintly Sylvia sacrificing everything for her little sister. You love that story, don't you? It lets you feel good about your mediocre life." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I kept my voice steady. "Is that really what you think of me after all these years?" "What I think," Nancy said coldly, "is that you're jealous. You've always been jealous. And now you've turned Mom against me too. Mom made her own decisions based on what she saw and heard. Right after your husband went running to her with some ridiculous story, did you put him up to that, or was that his idea? I was done. There was no reasoning with her, no possibility of making her understand. I think we should take some time apart, Nancy. This conversation isn't productive." Fine by me, she snapped. But don't think you can just waltz back into my life when you get over your little tantrum. And don't expect an invitation to the vow renewal we're planning. We're going to do it right this time without family drama. She hung up before I could respond, though I had nothing left to say anyway. I sat in stunned silence, the phone still in my hand, trying to process the hatred I'd heard in my sister's voice. Derek moved to the couch and put his arm around me. I'm so sorry, Sylvia. I knew she was selfish, but I never imagined she could be so cruel. I've been such a fool, I whispered. All these years I thought if I just loved her enough, if I was patient enough, she would eventually appreciate what I did for her. But she doesn't just not appreciate it. She resents me for it. This isn't your fault, Derek insisted. You gave her nothing but love and support. The fact that she's twisted that into something negative says everything about her character and nothing about yours. Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated further. Nancy began calling our relatives, telling her version of events, painting me as a jealous sister who couldn't stand to see her happy. Some believed her, including our Aunt Linda, who called to lecture me about family loyalty. Others were more skeptical, having seen Nancy's self-centered behavior over the years. My mother remained firmly in my corner, a new and healing experience for me. She came to stay with us for a weekend, and we had long, honest conversations about the past. She apologized repeatedly for putting so much responsibility on me as a teenager, for not seeing how Nancy's behavior had affected me, for her own absence during critical years. I was so wrapped up in my own pain after the divorce, then so focused on making my new marriage work that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me, she admitted. You became the parent while I was still acting like a child. I'm so sorry, Sylvia. Her acknowledgement was a balm to old wounds I hadn't even realized were still open. For the first time, I felt seen by my mother. Really seen. A week after the wedding, I received an email from Nancy. The subject line was my side of the story, and it contained a long, rambling justification for her behavior. She claimed I had always made her feel inadequate, that my martyrdom had been a burden on her throughout her life. She accused me of trying to make her feel guilty for my choices she never asked me to make. You decided not to go to college. You decided to work instead. That was your choice. I never asked you to sacrifice anything for me, but you've held it over my head our entire lives. I'm done living in the shadow of your so-called sacrifice. The email continued in that vein, rewriting our shared history to cast me as a manipulative presence in her life, rather than the supportive sister I tried to be. Reading it was painful, but also strangely liberating. I could see now with perfect clarity that nothing I could have done would ever have been enough for Nancy. Her narrative about our relationship had no basis in reality. With Derek's encouragement, I drafted a short final email to my sister. I didn't argue with her version of events or try to defend myself. Instead, I simply wrote, Nancy, I've read your email, and I understand that this is how you perceive our relationship. I can't change your feelings or perceptions. I can only say that everything I did came from a place of love, not manipulation or martyrdom. I never expected gratitude, just basic respect and kindness. It's clear that we need space from each other. I wish you happiness in your marriage and your life. I hope someday we can find a way back to a healthy relationship, but for now, it's best if we don't contact each other. With love, despite everything, Sylvia. I sent the email, then blocked Nancy's number on my phone. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to grieve the loss of the sister I thought I had, and to begin healing from decades of unrecognized emotional abuse. That night, I cried in Derek's arms, finally releasing the pain I'd been holding inside. I've lost her, I sobbed. I've lost my sister. Derek stroked my hair gently. Maybe, or maybe someday she'll grow up enough to see the truth. But either way, Sylvia, you found yourself. And that's what matters most right now. I didn't understand what he meant then. But as the days turned into weeks, I would begin to discover exactly what he was talking about. The 18 months following Nancy's wedding were a time of profound change and healing for me. At first, I was simply numb, going through the motions of daily life, while trying to process the shocking revelation about my sister's true feelings toward me. I would catch myself reaching for my phone to text Nancy about something trivial, only to remember that we weren't speaking. The habit of being her supportive older sister was deeply ingrained, and breaking it was painful. Derek suggested I see a therapist, and initially I resisted. In my family, therapy was seen as a sign of weakness, something for other people with real problems. But after weeks of insomnia and bursting into tears at random moments, I finally made an appointment with Dr. Laura Bennett, a therapist specializing in family trauma. What you're describing, Dr. Bennett told me during our third session, sounds like a classic dynamic in which one sibling becomes parentified, taking on responsibilities that should belong to the actual parents, while the other sibling becomes accustomed to receiving care without reciprocation. Her words were a revelation. There was a name for what had happened to me, a pattern that others had experienced. I wasn't alone in this. The most difficult part, she continued, is that the parentified child often doesn't recognize the abnormality of the situation until something dramatic forces them to see it. They normalize their own sacrifice because it's all they've ever known. Over the months of therapy, I began to understand how the dynamic with Nancy had shaped my entire life. I had defined my worth through my usefulness to others, particularly my sister. I had accepted scraps of affection in return for constant giving. I had made myself smaller to make room for Nancy's largeness. Your sister's behavior at the wedding was cruel, Dr. Bennett acknowledged, but in a way it was also a gift. It forced you to see a truth you might have spent your whole life avoiding otherwise. She was right. As painful as the revelation had been, it had also set me free. Free from the exhausting obligation of constantly supporting someone who saw my support as an imposition. Free from the narrative that I was only valuable insofar as I could serve others. Free to discover who I might be when I wasn't defined by my relationship with Nancy. Derek was my steadfast support throughout this journey. He had always seen what I couldn't had tried gently for years to help me recognize the imbalance in my relationship with Nancy. Now he encouraged me to explore aspects of myself I had neglected. You always wanted to travel more, he reminded me one evening as we sat on our back porch. But whenever we planned a trip, you'd worry about what Nancy might need while we were gone. It was true. I had missed countless opportunities because I was always on standby for Nancy's next crisis or demand. With that obligation lifted, Derek and I began to plan the adventures we postponed for years. We started small with weekend trips to nearby states. Then for our anniversary, Derek surprised me with a 2-week tour of Italy, something I dreamed of since college, but had always considered an unreachable luxury. Standing before Michelangelo's, David gazing up at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, watching the sunset over the canals of Venice, I felt a joy I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. You're different here, Derek observed, as we shared a bottle of Chianti in a small Tuscan restaurant. More relaxed, more you. I knew what he meant. Away from the weight of my history with Nancy, I was discovering parts of myself that had been buried for decades. I laughed more easily. I tried new things without worrying about failing. I expressed opinions without first calculating how they might be received. Back home, I began to make other changes. I joined a book club, something I'd always wanted to do, but had never prioritized. I took a watercolor painting class at the community center, discovering a creative side I hadn't known existed. I reconnected with old friends I lost touch with, many of whom admitted they had pulled away because they couldn't stand watching how Nancy treated me. We tried to tell you, my friend Diane confessed over coffee, but you always defended her. After a while, it became too hard to watch. My relationship with my mother also transformed. For the first time, we related to each other as equals, as two women with complex histories and shared regrets. She had her own journey of healing to undertake, coming to terms with how she had failed both of her daughters in different ways. I thought I was protecting you both after the divorce, she told me during a long weekend visit. But in reality, I was just protecting myself from having to face how broken our family had become. I put adult responsibilities on you because it was easier than bearing them myself. Her honesty was healing for both of us. We established new boundaries and new traditions, finding a healthier dynamic than we'd ever had before. Nancy, meanwhile, remained firmly outside my life. She had tried to contact me a few times in the months following the wedding, but her messages were always accusatory, never apologetic. Richard had apparently doubled down on his support of her version of events, and they had created a narrative in which they were the victims of my jealousy and spite. Through mutual friends and family, I heard snippets about their lives. Their marriage was already showing signs of strain. Nancy had been passed over for a promotion she'd been certain was hers. Richard's business was facing some kind of legal trouble. In the past, I would have reached out offering support and assistance without being asked. Now, I simply wished them well from a distance and continued focusing on my own healing. Occasionally, I still felt pangs of guilt about maintaining the separation. Nancy was still my sister after all. We shared a history, shared blood. But Dr. Bennett helped me understand that family connections don't obligate us to accept mistreatment. Love can exist alongside healthy boundaries, she reminded me. In fact, the healthiest love requires boundaries to flourish. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, I received a text from Nancy. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was brief and surprisingly vulnerable. I miss you. Things aren't the same without you. No apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt she'd caused, just a statement of her own feelings, her own loss. It was quintessentially Nancy, focused entirely on her experience rather than mine. I didn't respond, not out of spite or anger, but because I recognized that nothing had changed. Nancy missed having me in her life because I had always made her life easier. She missed my support, my availability, my willingness to put her needs first. She didn't miss me as a person with my own needs and feelings. 6 months later, I heard through my mother that Nancy and Richard were divorcing. Richard had apparently been unfaithful with one of Nancy's bridesmaids, the same Madison who had been chosen as maid of honor instead of me. Nancy was devastated and angry, telling anyone who would listen that she had been betrayed by the people closest to her. My mother relayed this information cautiously, clearly expecting me to rush to Nancy's aid as I always had in the past. But I had learned too much about myself and about healthy relationships to fall back into old patterns. I'm sorry she's going through this, I told my mother sincerely. It sounds incredibly painful. I hope she has good support around her. She's been calling me every day, my mother admitted. Sometimes multiple times. She's very angry. I'm sure she is, I acknowledged. Betrayal is a difficult thing to process. There was a pause before my mother asked the question I knew was coming. Will you call her? She could use her big sister right now. I took a deep breath, feeling the old pull of obligation, but also the newer, stronger sense of self-preservation. No, Mom. I can't be that person for her anymore. It wouldn't be healthy for either of us. To my surprise, my mother didn't argue. I understand, she said simply. You've been through a lot too. Your boundaries are important. It was a small moment, but it represented a seismic shift in our family dynamic. My needs were being recognized. My boundaries were being respected. My healing was being prioritized alongside Nancy's pain. And that perhaps was the greatest gift to come out of the whole painful experience. Not just my own growth, but the growth of those around me who were willing to change. As I approach the 1.5 year mark since that fateful wedding day, I can honestly say I'm happier and healthier than I've ever been. My marriage to Derek has deepened as we've explored new experiences together. My friendships are more authentic now that I'm bringing my whole self to them, not just the nurturing, giving parts. My relationship with my mother continues to evolve in positive ways. I've even found unexpected fulfillment in my career, taking on new responsibilities that challenge and excite me. It turns out that when I'm not exhausting myself managing Nancy's life alongside my own, I have energy and creativity to spare. Do I still miss my sister sometimes? of course. There are moments when I see something that would make her laugh, or remember a shared joke from our childhood and feel a pang of sadness for what's been lost. But I've come to accept that what I'm really missing is the sister I wished I had, not the sister Nancy actually was. I don't know what the future holds for our relationship. Perhaps someday Nancy will gain the self-awareness to recognize her role in what happened. Perhaps she'll reach out with genuine remorse rather than self-serving manipulation. If that day comes, I'll be open to rebuilding our connection on healthier terms. But if it never comes, I'll be okay. I've learned that my value doesn't depend on my usefulness to others, that love shouldn't require the erasure of my own needs, that healthy relationships are balanced with giving and receiving flowing in both directions. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to set boundaries to honor your own worth, to expect basic respect from those who claim to love you. Sometimes, walking away from a toxic relationship is the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for the other person. If you're in a relationship where you feel consistently devalued, where your giving is taken for granted, where your needs are dismissed, I hope my story gives you courage. It's not easy to break patterns that have defined your life for decades. It's not easy to risk losing someone you love, even when that love has become a source of pain. But on the other side of that difficult journey is a freedom and peace I never imagined possible. What would you do if the person you loved most betrayed your trust? Would you have the courage to walk away? Or would you stay hoping things would change? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and transformation. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey.